Welcome to the Scrum Master Power Hour. I am Patty. I'm the founder of Agile Mindset Consulting, and I started this meetup about a year and a half ago to support Scrum Masters on their journey to fully step into this role. This is a bi-weekly meetup, and every alternating week, I invite a special guest in to have a fireside chat with me. And this is always a person that I have a trusting relationship with, that I feel like they will honestly represent what goes on out there in the world and can give you honest feedback about what to expect as you're going on your journey. We'll talk for about 30 minutes or so. It will be an honest, unrehearsed conversation. And then we will have time at the end for some questions and answers. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the screen over to our special guest today, Nisha. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself, tell us a little bit about her career journey, and then of course, where she has currently landed herself today in this very moment. So Nisha, take it away.
Hi guys, and hello Patty, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's so nice to see such a diverse range of people and have such positive energy on this. I'm sure we'll end up sharing some great insights together. I have, oh gosh, it's going to make me sound terribly old now, but over 20 years of experience delivering solutions in the technology space. I progressed from a business analyst role at DHL. I was leading programs and projects after that to widen my experience within the digital transformation space. And then I discovered Scrum about 13 years ago. I became a raving fan of it and started transitioning to Scrum Master and delivery manager roles. It felt like a natural transition for me, and I couldn't wait to see the back of Gantt charts and Microsoft Project and things like that. Although I have kind of where my roles have demanded it, dipped back into things like that where it's needed. I've got a wealth of experience across lots of different industries, including logistics, supply chain, not-for-profit, broadcast media and startups, and running projects and programs using very, very different and assorted frameworks. So I will be able to share with you my experiences with Scrum today. I also run a podcast, guys, so check that out too. I co-host the delivery podcast. It's called The Delivery Space. It's available on YouTube and also Spotify. It's basically bringing together practical delivery experiences of delivering products, projects, change, whether that's business change or whether that's technological change. And yeah, really bringing people like Patty and others, mentors, coaches, people whose opinions that we also respect to the fore, so you can get that practical knowledge. That's what we're about. Go for it, Patty. Let's go for the questions.
All right, so my first question here is, and let me just qualify this. So I'm originally from Long Island. Nobody knows that because I have no trace of a Long Island accent. I've lived in the South here in Charlotte for, oh gosh, kind of like you, I'm going to make myself sound like an old lady, but almost 20 years. But people don't typically know where I'm from. So I do detect an accent that you have. And as I kind of let the cat out of the bag, you are our first international guest here. So tell us where you're from.
Okay, yeah, I left that out, didn't I? Out of my introduction. I'm coming to you from the UK today, guys, in a little town called Leighton Buzzard, in the UK.
And relative to London, where is that?
It's probably about 30-40 minutes drive north of London.
Okay. All right. That gives us a little frame of reference. Awesome. All right. Well, let's dig into the questions here. So we're here today to talk about leadership versus management. So the title on my little graphic there on social media is More Leadership, Less Management, the critical component to Scrum team success. So that's what we're going to dive in today, folks. We're going to talk about it from the kind of C-suite executive level, all the way down to individual leadership as a team member. So we'll cover a broad range of topics here. So the first question I'd like to ask you here is, what is the difference between leadership with a capital L, the typical role of those people over there, the leaders, the stakeholders, and leadership with a lowercase l in the true sense of the word?
Okay, so for me, and again, I will speak to how I've related to these in my career. A leader as a role comes with a label. So the leaders over there, they will come with a label. So it will be a CEO, CMO, I'm a CTO, I'm a head of digital transformation, I'm a head of direct marketing. And just that label is a very surface level description. It gives you a clue about the business function that they're going to perform, but it tells you nothing about their characteristics. It's a very, very surface level. And a true leader, to me, is someone who is, let's say, grounded in their own self-awareness and intensely believes in the power of their teams. That is what I believe a true leader is. They have a learning mindset. They develop their teams, their own capabilities. They put themselves on a path of learning as well. They know what they know what they don't know, and they know that they're on a path to grow themselves. They also create a vision to draw people together towards a shared purpose. It's a very inclusive mindset they have. And, I said that they're grounded in that self-awareness. Well, these are the types of people that will think about leading by example. So they'll think about the behaviors that they are exhibiting, because people will watch the behaviors, and your behaviors create a culture. So to me, I hope that summarizes it. It's an overarching trait, and the core of why they behave like I've just described. I've seen really good true leaders behave. It's because they operate with ever expanding compassion. So they will think about and place themselves in other people's shoes when they're messaging, when they're talking, when they're interacting. And it's that level of focus that really endears other people to them, and makes them stand out, and people warm to them. So empathy and compassion is really an underlying trait that I see in true leaders.
Yeah, that's a great summary. And the reason I asked that question is because when we go into organizations, there's always a lot of lingo, and people don't really have a common understanding of what the words mean. And you go from company to company and they mean different things. So you talk about leaders as these, like I said, these group of people that are over there, they're way above our heads, they have a higher pay grade than us. But to your point, just because you have the title leader or leadership or stakeholder or manager, right, with a capital letter, does not mean that you are a leader as defined by, what you spoke to us about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to jump to the next question here. Why do you think people that are put into these leadership roles really struggle with the act and behaviors of leaders?
Why? Because it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do because you have a larger remit, right? As a leader, whatever area, a traditional leader within an organization typically has a larger remit. So they are, in charge of a group of people or a function. They have either their targets or their goals, or an overall strategic goal to foster or to attain. And I think some leaders struggle because it's an interpersonal thing. Some characteristics come naturally to some characteristics have to be learnt by others. it's a very varied in what I've seen, to be honest with you. So I think a lot of this is about also their journey as well so far. So certain leaders may have come through a pathway where it's less team-led or less compassion giving. It's been, let's say it's been purely academic, and they've not had to work with a large variety of teams before. They've not been exposed to that. So it can be for a variety of reasons where they struggle. Pressures of the role, their past, in terms of their past experiences and their past roles that they've had to fulfill. That's what I've seen. And you kind of, you know a good leader when you see one. I know that for sure, because you feel that rapport, you feel that engagement.
Yeah. And I wanted to just throw the word politics in there, and like org structure, and all of these things that maybe at smaller companies don't exist quite so in your face, but politics definitely play an aspect of, people are trying to, I don't want to say grab power, but they want to, move up the corporate ladder, and they feel like they have to step on other people, and they don't want to make other people mad because then they won't get their bonus or promotion. So there's a lot of competition in that might be stifling leadership characteristics.
And do you think also it is, I mean, leadership is fundamentally, to me, it's about that personal growth. So you'll meet that politics. Yes, you'll meet some, maybe even a culture clash within the workplace, but it is looking inwardly first to see how you can cope with it, or you can start engaging people in a dialogue to understand it a little bit more, rather than I'm going to do what I need to do to get where I need to go. And it doesn't matter who, who's in the way, sort of thing. So yeah, it's personal development is hard, and personal growth work is hard. And I think I've struggled. I've seen other really good leaders sometimes struggle with that idealistic view of leadership, and it truly is a growth path.
Yeah. And I always come back to emotional intelligence, being aware of and self-aware of what you're putting out there and how other people are receiving it and responding. And not that you can control other people's response, but you can certainly be aware of when they respond in certain ways, why. And if you're looking for a different response, maybe try something else.
Yeah.
So it's it's about not pointing fingers at other people, but taking personal responsibility for what you can take responsibility for. And that's yourself. And that takes it takes a big person to take a step back and say, oh, I made a mistake, and maybe admit that I made a mistake, and then talk about it, what you learned from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
People trust you, right?
Yeah,
you're honest.
Exactly. May I share an example?
Absolutely.
For me, this illustrates the difference between a leader and a manager. So it's personal experience from a long time ago, working for like one of the biggest air express companies in the world. Ain't no mountain high enough. I will not say any more, but you will know from that. We were putting into beta a content-rich customer booking application. So Patty, if I were going to send you a parcel package, I'd call the call center up. They'd quote me transit time, understand the dimensions, quote me a price, arrange for it to be picked up, etc. This content-rich booking application was going to be hosted at a regional data center. I'd been working on this program for a while, and we were running it traditional waterfall. This was in the early 2000s. I hadn't come into contact with Scrum yet. I probably didn't even know what it meant back then. But if you think about the booking tool, the booking application, you can imagine the payload impact, the data impact on the network and the contention with other core services, especially when yours truly forgets to carry out a network impact analysis. So you can imagine what happened at the beginning of the beta. I had been so consumed by getting the application tested, organizing a global UAT, making sure all representatives from everywhere were, at our development center of excellence out in Malaysia. I was coordinating all of it. My counterpart project manager then turns up in the Netherlands, where we were running that beta, and the call center opens at 7 in the morning. Slowly, within the first hour, that customer booking application tool ground to a halt, and they started taking orders over the phone. I was in the UK, panic-stricken, thinking, my gosh, this is my fault. I've missed doing this network impact analysis. I was so busy working with the business to get this application tested. The first thing my manager, he was a program manager at that time, almost like a program director at that time. The first thing he said to me is, "Are you okay? I know how hard you've worked on this. Are you okay?" He didn't reprimand me and help me to come out with a solution. He's very technically focused. And in fact, he's one of my dear mentors till today. But just that behavior of his gave me a real good framing for what compassionate leadership actually looks like. Not only did it make me think, wow, I want to be like this to someone that makes mistakes, but because actually it feels so much better receiving that level of input rather than saying, you're going to have your ass kicked. You shouldn't have missed that. Right?
Because what does that, if you're in the middle of this crisis, how is that going to help if that person acts like that towards you? It's not going to solve anything. And I think, in this, we're only human, right? But in this idea that we always expound that we have to test and learn and fail fast and make mistakes and be okay with it, we can speak that out loud all the time. It's like lip service. But then do we live that? Do we live that ourselves? And do we treat other people with that same idea? Because every company that I worked for and every Scrum Master that I work with, is constantly afraid that they're going to get fired for making the littlest mistake. I haven't seen it happen. I mean, I've seen screw ups, like it costs tens of millions of dollars a company. They fix it and they get it out the door, right? And then they try to analyze what went wrong, and everybody points fingers because they think they're going to be fired. And then nothing ever gets fixed. You add more layers to the gates, checkers, right? I was talking, Arlen's in here. I was talking about this when he was doing the fireside chat. And that doesn't solve the problem. It slows everything down and you don't know where things went wrong. But that's a culture of fear. And that's not leadership.
No.
And how do we, so to kind of segue, like, how do we support this idea of changing this mindset of fear-based culture versus let's really test and learn and be true leaders?
In the places I've seen this done well, it doesn't happen overnight. So there's no quick fix to this process, because if you're dealing with culture, to my mind, you're dealing with something that's systemic, that's grown with the tenure of senior people, certain behaviors that have been fostered, etc., etc. So where I've seen it done well, it's the subcultures that are created by Scrum teams where they have been allowed to experiment, and the subcultures have been created not on a massive scale, but on a small scale to start off with, where experimentation has been okay. Leadership have also been coached in getting them on board with that. And Scrum Masters, Agile coaches and teams have been allowed to progress without fear on a small scale on the work that they are working on. So it's, oh, it's not going to change overnight, but I've seen it done well, where you actually prove the success of delivery and a really good pattern that you set up through your teams, because you create effectively, if your teams are running well, they're getting on, they're producing great outcomes for your customers or your end users within your organization. It's when you've got a team with a good rapport, other teams around them will look at them and go, hey, what happened to me? Why can't I work for that team? Look how they're all getting along. Look how they're still producing stuff. Look how they're not sweating at the weekends and still not winning. So I would always say start small, prove value, and through small experiments, get leadership on board, and manage the expectation around failure, and failure fast.
Yeah, because going back to waterfall and project management, you read the white papers, and some of these are, they're old white papers, but the data is there. 86% of very well detailed planned 2-year projects fail anyway.
Yeah.
They don't meet their deadline. They don't meet their budget, right? Then you have to cut people out. That's where you fire people, right? Because you got to find the money to continue the project. That stuff fails anyway. So let's be honest about it. And let's deliver small pieces and test and learn and add to that, lack of a better term, MVP.
Yeah.
And then build something successively that we know gets small wins. And by the time we have the product is never finished, but let's say we get it to a really great state. Everybody loves it because the customer has kind of helped design it as we go along. And it's been tweaked, and it just makes sense.
It does.
Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
And hard.
It's not, yes, but fostering that attitude is the difficult bit. Once you got it, and once you start proving value, like look what that team did over there. The development team, me as a Scrum Master, I facilitated a great dialogue between the development team and the end user, or the development team and the customer. And do you know what? More and more, Patty, I've come across development teams, and I know my friend Jill Bennett is here. She can testify to this as well in her role. But development teams are hungry for the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? What's the purpose behind it? What's the customer going to get out of it? What's the satisfaction I'm going to get in delivering value? Like, if you think about it, software developers are like craftsmen, right? They love their craft. They believe in their craft. As a Scrum Master, it's not your job to tell them how to do their craft. It's to facilitate them so they can solve a problem. And they themselves will give you a solution and a direction and the how. But they more and more, rather than hearing developers just say, oh, Nish, just tell me what to do. Make sure that, we're involved in writing the spec, and technically we can take it from there. 2, why are we doing what we're doing? Can we have that dialogue, please, with the end user and the customer? We need to figure out more about this. We'd love them to be involved in refinement, so we can talk this user story through, this epic through, and then disseminate it correctly, so that, by the time it hits the sprint, we got agreement on what we're doing. There's the satisfaction, right? You can almost feel that satisfaction to say, they have the power, developers, to produce something that a user is going to use forever, for ages, until it gets refactored, overwritten, whatever. But, that's something to be respected, I think.
Yeah, I'm always, as many of you know, and as we've talked about, my original career was a science teacher.
Yeah.
So I don't have development experience, but when I started working with developers and seeing what it is that they quote unquote do all day, and how much effort it takes to produce something, like any of these websites that you go to where you order something, or, Miro, Jira, like all these pieces of software that make our lives easier, people built that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the talent that goes into creating that. And yeah, they're not necessarily always perfect, right? People hate Jira, but, people created that. And I sure as heck have tons of respect for that. I'm not the expert in how to make all that work. But to your point, I'm there to help facilitate people working together so they can do their craft.
Exactly.
And the other thing I wanted to mention, and this again goes back to being a science teacher, and I'm always looking at things from that lens. When we're very young, we are shut down from asking why. Think about a small child. Why, mom? Why, dad? Why is it this way? Why is the sky blue? Why? And adults just get so annoyed that children stop asking that question. They get the message that it's not okay. And a lot of it is the adults are not comfortable saying, I don't know, or they're not comfortable saying, let's look it up, or, they just don't want to be bothered. Like, let's be honest, right? But it's having that patience, right? Helping children foster that creativity and that curiosity, which translates into this working world as adults where people are not afraid to say, why are we doing this? And that they're going to get shut down. Because just because people are not asking doesn't mean they're not curious. And it's not that they're complaining. Why are we doing this? It's more of, can you please, explain to me like what the customer needs so I can do a good job?
Yeah, exactly. Or have a dialogue with them to come up with alternative ways of doing different things. Because sometimes we don't give people credit for thinking laterally, thinking outside of the box, thinking there are other ways to do things than what the PO, the product owner, may have come up with. So there's other ways of solving the problem. And it brings me on to another thing, Patty, like it's presenting a problem in such a way to the team that they feel inspired to come to the table, get involved, have that dialogue with the product owner. Product owner doesn't always need to be the go-between as well. So as soon as once a product owner has actually set that direction, it's a beautiful thing to have. Like, for example, the practice of 3 amigos, having the developer, an end user or customer, and a tester within your team totally engage with that user, really trying to figure out, the how of what's going to be produced to meet their requirements. There's so many ways, so many good ways that you can do this. And I think proving this on a smaller scale within Scrum teams is the best way to go, because you actually can show these practices, invite your leaders to your sprint reviews, tell them what they're missing, make it compelling for them to turn up. Say, beat your drum. As Scrum Masters, you need to beat the drum for your team and say, if you don't come to this sprint review, it's a shame, because you're going to miss out on the demonstration of, these amazing features that we've developed. We really want to tell you about them. Engage them.
Yeah, and that is an excellent segue. It's like you're psychic. This is an excellent segue, because I was going to ask you next, like, what can people do as Scrum Masters? Because to your point, stakeholders don't want to show up to another darn meeting, especially if they have multiple sprint reviews for multiple teams. Like, what can people do as Scrum Masters to beat the drum, to start the experimentation conversation, to support the team, to radiate out to leaders? Hey, can you support us and act like leaders? No, I mean, you don't say it that way, but how can we encourage the people outside the team to behave more like leaders and support us?
Right.
And that was a lot, so sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. I will try and remember all of that.
I'm so excited to talk to you.
If I miss something, tell me and we'll circle back. Okay. So I would invite them to see that subculture that you're creating within the teams. As Scrum Masters, we also have to be some really good storytellers. So paint a picture of what that team was like when you started working with them. Paint a picture of where they were, what they were doing. Paint a picture of their transition. Where were they before? Where have you taken them? What state have you taken them to? How have you progressed? What have you developed? What have you delivered? How has that relationship between your team members and the other parts of the organization improved? So invite them to see that subculture that you're creating. Secondly, a record of delivery, guys, invites attention. So Scrum teams I've seen work really well, prove their own value by setting a good record of delivery. And that means that, you know, Scrum Masters have to facilitate that interaction with other parts of the business, end users, customers, etc., to make sure that you're building the right thing. The other thing is walking in the shoes of the leaders. And this takes a bit of courage, because it takes approaching those leaders and saying, let me know what your challenges are. What are your challenges? Can I meet with you on a regular basis so I can have a chat with you, update you about progress of the team, update you with some really cool wins that they're putting out there on an informal basis, but help me understand what your challenges are. What are your aspirations beyond what the team is producing at the moment? Try and get an understanding and try and develop that dialogue with your senior stakeholders. That's another way that I believe we can help. The other thing that I found really, really helpful, if I could find a book here. I've got loads of books around here, by the way, but I'm going to wait.
This is why I love you so much, because I'll do the same thing and turn around to my bookshelf and pull
yeah, right. So another really cool thing, really cool book, you'll see it's got post-its all over it, is Bob Galen's extraordinarily badass agile coaching book. And he offers a way to engage, and he calls this process coaching up. And we're going to be talking to him about it on one of our forthcoming podcasts. But the way he describes it is to form that relationship, to form that rapport, to form that dialogue. Try first of all with stakeholders. If we come at it from an agile coaching and Scrum Master point of view solely to make them feel like, oh, that's not, you shouldn't be doing things like that. That's anti-agile, or that's an anti-pattern, they're going to have their guard up straight away. You've got to try and build that rapport. So you come at it from an advisory stance, a stance of wanting to find out more, a stance of understanding how they themselves see the business evolving. You know, get them to talk you through that bigger picture, and then work with them, partner with them. I've even, you know, for some of my stakeholders, especially those within editorial, it took me ages to understand editorial processes for a legal services company that I used to work for. And I'd asked to shadow my head of editorial for 2-3 days so I could understand what her aspirations were, what her goals were, how she ran her department, what her pain points were. So, you know, I could get an all-round picture of her role. Do it.
That's amazing. I love that you just said that, because it, you know, often we're very intimidated by other people.
Yeah.
Especially ones that have bigger titles than us. They have a bigger pay grade. We put them up on these pedestals. And one thing that I've noticed, and you know, I've worked remote since before the pandemic, but I think the pandemic has kind of softened some of that intimidation factor, because you're no longer walking into a person's big mahogany office with a giant desk and they're sitting in their suit, right? You're looking in their bedroom.
Yeah.
And I think that that's helped me feel much more comfortable talking with and being honest, like really honest with people way above my head. But it's also having the courage to, like you said, reach out to these people in other parts of the business. And if you don't know what they do, just say, hey, I'd like to learn more about what it is that you do. And that will give you so much context and perspective in, if there are impediments that particular line of business or part of the organization are causing for your particular team. You get an understanding and empathy for what they're dealing with on their side, and then somehow figure out to foster communication and working together. But you got to understand the other people before you can do that.
Yes. It's almost like you've got to give a little to get a little. So once they see that you're willing to understand that without letting any process or any delivery framework get in the way, abandon that for a little bit. And you know what? I've actually been quite cheeky. There's in some companies that I've worked for, they've been
for those
like,
that are not British, what does that mean?
oh, cheeky. As in I've used other avenues to get to know people. So like, for example, all legit, by the way, but just try to think out of the box. So say, for example, if there are leadership programs happening, or there are leadership talks happening, or lunch and learns that are happening around your organization or virtually, I've used those to connect to other leaders that I need to engage with more. And immediately you've got something to talk about because you've got the subject to talk about that they were speaking on, and you've got an opener into that conversation to get them, to get to know them a little bit more. So yeah, I would try, and if you're not getting headway through emails and things like that, try other ways. There are other ways.
It's kind of like, I think we're afraid of rejection.
Yeah,
we're afraid that people are gonna, and it does happen, right? I mean, we all send people DMs in LinkedIn, like, hey, you want a coffee chat or whatever it is, right? And people don't respond, and you make that to mean something, and it doesn't mean anything. Or if people are, and this is kind of like understanding like what people do and what they say is not about you. If they don't respond, or if they respond gruffly, or they're like, I'm too busy, it's not about you, move on to the next person.
Yes,
right. And
absolutely.
build relationships with people, and eventually you build relationships with the people that are gruff and like not wanting to engage with you because they hear that you're doing good things, right, from their peers or whatever. So it's not overnight, like you said.
Yeah, delivery draws attention, even from those people who might be the gruffalos, even from those, eventually.
And I was saying to some of my teacher clients over the past week, they understand what it's like to have to work with everybody. Because when you have a classroom full of students, you will not like or get along with everyone, but you have to learn how to get through to everyone and work with everyone. And I think that's a skill you develop as a teacher, but coming through corporate America, that might not be natural because you haven't been quote unquote forced. I hate to use that word, it's a bad word, but you haven't been put in the position where you really need to, so you might avoid people that you don't like. And as a Scrum Master, I'm like, I got to set up one-on-ones with everybody. I don't care what their response is to me. I don't care if they hate everything that I say. It's my job to get through to this person in whatever way I can and not take it personally. Yeah. And that's like the biggest lesson for me. And it made me a stronger person in ways I never imagined.
That's what resiliency is about though, right? Because you'll look for other ways in order to get the answers that you need. You won't let it get you down, because you're not about escalating or anything like that, but what you're saying is you're going to look for other ways to get the answers that you need. And it makes you creative, actually. But soon enough, that's a really good point that you made. Do not ever take it personally, because you don't know what the other person or the other stakeholder or the other senior leader that you're trying to get in touch with is also going through at that time.
Yep. And until you understand what that is, or you know them as a human being, you build that trust, you won't know. No. But once you do know and you can kind of break in, right, then you'll understand where they're coming from, and then you can coach them, right? Then you can speak to them in a different way.
Yeah.
So not easy when you're reading the Scrum guidance, taking the CSM or PSM exam. You're like, oh, this is great. This is so super easy. And then you get on the job and you're like, wow, there's a lot more to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know
I've said it before, we're all humans. We are super wriggly. We've invented so many different pathways, so many systems, so many ways of working, so many things to get whatever we wanted out of the door and done and accomplished. We're super creative, but that's also created some set ways of doing things for us that now in our current marketplace, we find ourselves challenged, right? To think a lot more flexibly.
Right. Because this is, I mean, it's not the Industrial Revolution anymore, where it's like turn up the conveyor belt and we just push out more things and everybody just does their little part. We have to interact with each other to solve complex problems. And that involves a completely different skill set that we are not taught in school. And I haven't been a classroom teacher in a long time. I don't think things have changed very much. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but we're not teaching those skills. We're still teaching people industrial behavior patterns and memorizing facts and producing results on a test. And like, that's not important anymore. And I think until we let that go and revamp the way we educate people, we are going to continue to still struggle with all of this. Yeah. So that's why I'm like a big proponent of changing education, because that's where this starts.
Yeah, I think there's a massive education piece to do here. There's a lot we can actually do around learning and learning methods and making it safe to fail within the education system itself, and iterative learning. And I know you and I have spoken about this offline as well, Patty, but there is a lot. If we wanted to, you know, as a movement, or those that recognize that there has to be that agility and that education piece around agility a lot earlier, not waiting till we hit the corporate world. Yeah,
it's hard to change, right? When you get to be 21, 40, whatever it is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been so awesome. I mean, like I always say with my guests, like we can sit here and talk for hours. I do want to be respectful of people's time box. Let's open it up to take some questions. So if you've heard some really great stuff and you have a question for Nisha, throw it in the chat and I will kind of call it out and then we will see what you say, Nisha.
Happy to answer anything.
So as a good teacher and as a good coach, you sit and wait.
I love what Seth said here. My second grade teacher told my mum that I asked too many questions and now it benefits me. Absolutely. It is a game of questions, Seth.
And the thing is, a lot of people will say that to kids and it shuts them down and they never ask questions again. And that's what we do not need.
No, absolutely not. There's nothing worse than being in a team scenario, guys, and, you know, just cutting someone dead when they're either trying to explain themselves or trying to get across an idea. Yeah, it's a cringeworthy thing to experience.
All right, okay, so Sammy has some stakeholder management questions.
Okay, a stakeholder adds requirements on an issue that has already been moved to done. What advice would you give me on this? Okay, so Sammy. Hey, Sammy. Okay. Hey. Thank you for asking that great question. So if that's an item, or let's say a user story that's already been done, it meets your agreed definition of done, then what I would do is negotiate with your stakeholder, or I assume your stakeholder is your product owner in this case, to put the change in to the following sprint. Or if you've got capacity within the current sprint, the team can work on it and change it. So it all depends. If you've got capacity within the current sprint, you can change it. But negotiate first. Understand what that sprint is filled up with for the rest of the team, where you are in the sprint, the complexity of other things within your sprint backlog, and then take the right decision, but take it with the team and the product owner. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay, Samia, I'm looking into transitioning from teaching to Scrum Master role. I've been a teacher in Texas public schools for 19 years. Wow, Samia. I have many strengths, but I'm at a loss as to how to translate my strengths into my new role as a Scrum Master. You need to get on Patty's program, Samia. Where are you, lovely lady?
I'm right here.
Hey.
Hey, I've been listening to you carefully, and I've been listening to Patty as well, the interaction between the two of you, and you were discussing leadership. Over here, as a teacher, they teach us servant leadership.
Yes.
So you serve the public, and I'm good at that. I mean, never had a problem. But I've experienced burnout after COVID, and a lot of teachers have.
Yeah.
And I became Scrum certified about 2 years ago, but now I'm looking into transitioning into this field. I have a bachelor's in computers, but I've not used that degree per se, and I'm not a coder. I don't know how to program, but my sister's a Scrum Master, and she encouraged me to get into this area. What would you suggest? Is it a viable option for me?
Patty, are you okay if I offer some suggestions?
Absolutely.
Okay, this
Absolutely.
is wonderful for Samia that you're wanting to do this. It's a really cool thing that you're trying to do. Think about first of all, you've probably done this already, and Patty will guide you through this, I know it, but think about all of those transferable skills that you can bring from your teaching practice into your Scrum practice. So there's certain things that are so meshed with being a Scrum Master that will be, like, as Patty said earlier on in our conversation here, stakeholder management, playing to multiple personalities, reading the room, understanding team dynamics, building relationships, all of that is probably very systemic within you, Samia. So think about that, articulate to other organizations, maybe if you can, go do temporary stints in organizations where you know, either through your connections, through your sister, where you can shadow other Scrum Masters. It may be paid, it may not be paid, but explore different opportunities where you can. And yeah, I would definitely seek further counsel from Patty as well.
I'm in Houston, which is largely oil and gas. And my sister is in Dallas, which is a big IT base.
Right.
So for me to get my foot in the door here, I am lacking experience because I'm up against a lot of experienced people. I don't mind working for free because I'm taking time off. I haven't signed any teaching contract this school year. So I'm looking to dive in if somebody gives me a chance to do that.
Network as well, Samia, network a lot. Okay. So use LinkedIn, get onto forums like this, look out for Scrum Master discussion groups. Again, Patty will be able to guide you as well around those that are more US centric, so you can tap into the right people. But I would say networking is a big factor for contact.
Okay.
And I would
thank you so much, Nisha.
That's great. And I want to kind of piggyback on what you just said about networking. I think and I've talked about this before, and I made this mistake very badly when I first started quote unquote networking many, many years ago. I would just call people and I would pick their brain and move on to the next person and move on to the next person. And I think from my perspective, I was just looking for somebody to tell me a silver bullet, something that I was probably wanting to hear that nobody was telling me because I was making it up in my head, if that makes sense. I was expecting it to be just practice your interviewing skills and somebody will give you a chance, or just put some keywords on your resume and somebody will give you a chance. That won't get you far if you have skill gaps. So you have to create opportunities for you to get those skills. And that's why I said in the beginning, Scrum Master may be the second step for you. You may have to do something in between. You may have to somehow create Scrum Master experience in an organization you volunteer for, or start a side hustle and do it Scrum. Like that's what I did. You have to be creative to get the stuff on your resume, so people will see that you actually have the skills and you're not just wanting the job. And the networking piece, and this is the hard piece, is you have to build relationships with the same people for a while. And then they'll be like, oh, hey, I have the perfect person to refer for a job. But if you just kind of bounce around from person to person and person, you don't build any relationship. They don't know you, they don't trust you. There's no impetus for them to open a door for you. And I say that on the other end of it, because if I don't know somebody, I'm not going to refer them to my company, because it speaks about me if they don't deliver.
That's true.
Does that make sense?
True. Yes.
And for the longest time, I had the hardest time verbalizing that, because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I also want to be honest with what people are saying and thinking. So, wouldn't you rather know than have people continue to just pat you on the butt and say, good luck?
That's true.
So did that answer your question?
Yeah, the same thing is happening in teaching now. The principal asks you, the principal asks you if she needs somebody, she'd rather go through you, and you refer a teacher versus her going online and checking to see who else had applied for that position. She wants somebody to vouch for that person. And I understand that. So I have to go out there and network. And
it's a long game.
Yes,
it is. And that's why I said it's not a silver bullet. Like, you're going to meet somebody and they're going to open a door for you tomorrow and you're going to get a job in 2 weeks from now. This might take a few months, but you got to be persistent and resilient. Because that's
a lot of companies, like my sister's working for Allstate, they all have hiring freezes now, a lot of them. I don't know why.
Yeah, there's a lot out there hiring. I will tell you, I get contacted by recruiters every day.
Okay.
I get bombed in my inbox every day. A lot of the roles are not remote, like they're Charlotte local, and some are just not even Scrum Masters, but I will tell you that people are hiring.
Okay.
Maybe not Allstate, but anyway. And even if they're not, right, who cares? Like, this is your time to build your skills. So when they are hiring, you're gosh darn it ready.
Yeah.
Right.
So let me get off my soapbox. I want to just acknowledge our time. It's 6:32 here. Nisha, it is super late for you, so thank you so much. Is there any last words of wisdom you want to relay to us before we sign off for the evening?
First of all, thank you everyone for giving me your time. I really appreciate it. It's been lovely getting to just meet you all on this forum. It's been really enjoyable experience. My advice would be learn through your practice. Every team you meet will be different. Every experience you meet will be different. Every company scenario will be different. You'll start to recognize, as a true leader would, the things that work for you in your Scrum practice. So my advice would be keep your practice fresh. Samya, you definitely look for volunteer opportunities, and those of you that are looking, apply Scrum to your lives. If you're arranging a holiday, doing a renovation, doing some decoration around the house, even planning your week, apply Scrum to your lives. I wish I could, I'm going to disrupt loads of wires here, but if I could lift my laptop and turn it around the other way, I'll be able to show you my little Scrum board that I've got going for my life admin at the moment. So I would say grow your practice in whichever way that you can, and happy to connect with any of you to share any of my learnings. I'm on LinkedIn and hopefully you'll be able to find me there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
as I mentioned, I will clean up this recording. I will email it out to everybody, whether you're here or you weren't able to attend. But thank you so much for your time, Nisha. I look forward to chatting with you, of course, again, and I will be on your podcast coming up in a few weeks. So I'm so excited we have this opportunity to swap and continue to talk. Thank you, everybody, for showing up, for us, for you, for the whole community. Keep on the path. I'll see you folks in 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from now, we will have our next meeting, and the invite will go out later next week, and I'll keep you posted. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.